Hello everyone, and thank you for joining us today on our complimentary webinar, How to Excel in Diversity Hiring. My name is David, and I'll be the moderator for today's session. Today's presenters are Daria Friedman, Principal Talent Acquisition Analyst at Brandon Hall Group, Jeanette Maister, Managing Director of WCN Americas, and Seldric Blocker, Director of Campus Programs at NBCUniversal. I would like to extend a thank you to WCN for sponsoring today's webinar. WCN is a highly rated cloud-based talent acquisition suite. They have decades of award-winning recruitment software, expertise, and obsession with driving real change in organizations. Their products accelerate the improvement of the entire process of finding, attracting, engaging, assessing, and hiring the best talent. And thank you for inviting your client, NBCUniversal, to share their diversity hiring approach. Most of you know NBCUniversal as the world's leading media and entertainment company in the development, production, and marketing of entertainment, news, information to a global audience. NBCUniversal owns and operates a valuable portfolio of news and entertainment television networks, a premier motion picture company, significant television production operations, a leading television stations group, world-renowned theme parks, and a suite of leading internet-based solutions. NBCUniversal is a subsidiary of Comcast Corporation. And now, a little bit about Brandon Hall Group. Brandon Hall Group is a research and analyst firm that empowers excellence in organizations around the world through our research and tools. Our vision is to inspire a better workplace experience. We have world-class research, data, and expertise across all areas of human capital management. Currently, we have open surveys in onboarding, hiring practices, talent acquisition analytics, succession management, and leadership development. We would love to hear from you. In exchange, you could receive free gift cards, research reports, and more. If you'd like to download a copy of this presentation instantly, you can do so and find it in the handout section now. I would also like to remind you that this presentation is being recorded. The playback and slides will be provided to everyone within 24 hours of the webinar and a follow-up email. Of course, if you'd like to ask a question, please do so by typing it in the question box for our presenters. And now, let's turn it over to our presenters so we could get started with the agenda.
Thank you, David. This is Daria Friedman speaking, and I'm the Principal Analyst for Talent Acquisition at Brandon Hall Group. I'm thrilled to be here today with Jeanette Maister, from Managing Director, WCN Americas, and Seldric Blocker, Director of Campus Programs at NBCUniversal. Today we're going to discuss how to excel in diversity hiring, including giving you a baseline understanding of diversity and inclusion, why it's so important, best practices around diversity and inclusion hiring, technology that supports diversity and inclusion. And you know what I'm really excited about is to hear from Seldric about NBCUniversal's campus recruitment program. It's really terrific. I always look forward to your questions and comments, so please don't forget to ask your questions in the question box, and we'll respond to them at the end of the webinar. So, as we always do, we always like to start off the webinar with a poll to see what you are experiencing in your workforce with respect to the topic we're discussing today. And today, of course, it's diversity and inclusion. So please take a moment to answer this very short but very important question. Do you think your company culture promotes diversity and inclusion? Very much so, somewhat, or not really? You know, I was really surprised by the results from our survey, so I'm very curious to see what your responses are. And it is an important aspect of diversity and inclusion. Culture really impacts your whole organization's performance. So let's see what the responses are. Oh, okay, great. A little better than what we got in our poll. Very much so, 53%, somewhat, 44%, not really, 3%. And so let's see how that compares to our survey results. And as you can see here, it's pretty much of a mixed bag. And it's clear that at least half of the organizations are not doing as much as they could with respect to diversity and inclusion. Promoting a diversity and inclusive culture starts with the way you reach out to find and hire diverse employees. You can't have a culture that promotes diversity without having diverse employees. Best practices with respect to diversity and inclusion need to permeate the entire culture, not just having a one-time or sporadic event. It has to permeate the entire environment. So you'll see what I mean as we continue on. So first, I would like to start off with getting a comprehensive understanding of what diversity is and inclusion is, because it's fairly complex and it can vary depending on where you are in the world. So when I started off, David, so when I started off, thank you. So when I started off years ago doing some diversity research, diversity was a difficult concept to grasp. And diversity did not mean the same thing to all organizations. Organizations might track ethnicity and race, but they did not track other metrics. Certainly, employment discrimination law has evolved over time, and the EEOC has laws in place to protect applicants and employees from discrimination in hiring, promoting, discharging, and other types of practices, and based on race, color, religion, sex, age, national origin, disability, pregnancy, sexual harassment, and genetic information. And most employers with 15 or more employees are covered by the EEOC. In addition, there are other elements of diversity, such as thought and education. So diversity is a very comprehensive concept. Inclusion means that you're involving and empowering all your employees, and it also means that you're accommodating people that might not be able to be provided by providing, it means that you are accommodating people that might not be able to participate by providing relevant structures or facilities or services. For example, if a job applicant with a disability needs an accommodation, such as a language interpreter, the employer is required to provide that accommodation, as long as it doesn't cause the employer significant difficulty or expense. So diversity also varies by global region. An organization's perception of and focus on diversity can vary depending on where they're located in the world and even the industry. For instance, we've all heard of tech companies needing to focus on hiring women because most of their technical employees are men, and there's loads of articles in the news regarding all those tech companies like Google and Microsoft, etc. But thinking about different countries, diversity can also relate to different languages, cultural differences, and more. And so I think that a good thing to think about is whether your workforce reflects your organization's constituent population. So a constituent population can be your employees, your customers, your suppliers, the people residing in your area, the directors on your board, and if you're a healthcare company, it could be your patients. So this type of thinking is especially important for a public-facing organization. I did research several years ago for a police department out west, and they were having lots of difficulty hiring diverse talent. And so they were under a mandate that their workforce mirror the community population. I actually not only surveyed the new hires and the employees to see if there were any discrimination in the hiring practices, but I also surveyed the police departments that surrounded that particular area on the topic of diversity. And what I found out is that all the different agencies, they were having the same problem, finding diverse talent. In the end, I hope that they were all able to work together to find a solution. And I was heartened by the fact that the surrounding agencies were all willing to participate in the research. So let's look at diversity in terms of which parameters are tracked. After all, if an organization is not paying attention to who they are employing in terms of diversity, they have no metrics to measure success. Plus, they may not be complying with EEOC regulations. So as you can see by this chart, at least half are tracking disability, ethnicity, and religious affiliation. And then we see quite a few less are tracking areas of diversity like income status, education, generation, and sexual orientation. So you would think all these percentages would be higher, but they're not. And so what I did was curious about it, so I looked at it by organizational size to see if there are any differences. And what I found is that enterprise organizations, or those organizations that have 10,000 or more employees, they're more likely to track these metrics than mid-sized organizations, which is somewhere between 1,000 and 10,000 employees, and small organizations, less than 1,000 employees. For example, just in terms of tracking gender, we had 87% of enterprise organizations tracking gender compared to 39 and 42% of the organizations of the smaller organizations tracking gender. So size of organization definitely impacts how the extent to which the organization tracks diversity. And I don't know whether it has to do with resources, but there's some reason there that possibly is impacting it. In terms of inclusion, about half are tracking promotions, advancements, and employee turnover. And that's really important to ensure there's no discrimination in the way the organization treats employees. However, look at the recruitment ratios. Only a third of the organizations are looking at recruitment from an inclusion lens. Even fewer are looking at quality of hire. How can we hope to have a diverse workforce if we're not looking at inclusion metrics? The extent to which your hiring and recruiting process is inclusive. For example, how many candidates are you able to include in your screening process? Is there a technology that will help your recruiting and hiring process be more inclusive? We're going to talk more about that a little later on. And also, the same thing, I looked at this data by organizational size, and the same thing occurred. The larger organizations just seem to be better able to track these metrics than the smaller size organizations. So what are the business imperatives? Besides all these legal implications, why should organizations want to emphasize diversity and inclusion? So plain and simple, organizations that include diversity and inclusion practices in their recruitment marketing have seen an improvement in the level of quality of hires over the past year. However, only 38% of organizations actually implement that practice, diversity and inclusion, as part of their recruitment marketing. That's a huge difference, and that's pretty surprising. If you're not reaching out to all the different talent populations, you simply are missing out on the best talent and limiting your results. In addition, by engaging the different talent populations, you're actually educating them on your employer brand, what you do as a company, what you value. That process helps your organization as a whole, as an employer and as a business. So let's see how organizations are doing with respect to building relationships with diverse groups. So we're getting into the nitty-gritty of what it takes to hire diverse talent. And one of the ways to hire diverse talent is to develop relationships with groups and institutions that have diverse members. Generally, what happens is that these groups have different events, publications, and opportunities for recruiters to connect and communicate with the diverse members. For instance, at universities, there's a career placement department where organizations can promote employment opportunities by attending career fairs, seminars, promoting positions on their university publications. In addition, there are organizations that really develop the relationships with the professors to help identify students that would be great at their organization. There's countless ways in which an organization can partner with a university, college, or trade school. So another opportunity would be to partner with a diverse association or group. The organization can participate in conferences and webinars. They can promote the position on the job sites and their publications. Diverse associations are great resources for the organization. But what we see here, again, is pretty shocking. Not many organizations are making a considerable effort at recruiting from these institutions or groups. Our research shows that while organizations indicate it's so difficult for them to hire quality talent, yet they're not taking advantage of all the resources that are available to them. And all these different groups represent different elements of diversity. We'll talk a little bit about military veterans. There's so many associations that are willing to work with organizations so that veterans can be hired, and yet only 20% of organizations are making a considerable effort there. How about retirees? Retirees have many skills and are needed by organizations, and many would be able to work for a organization on a contract, full-time, part-time basis, but only 8% are trying to reach out to this talent pool. So I could go on and talk about each of these individual segments, but the point I want to make here is that clearly organizations are not doing everything they can to find talent. So let's look at some additional ways to find diverse talent and be more inclusive. Participating in networking and diversity conferences, career fairs, and other events. Great, that's great, a way to find diverse talent. It's also important to place job postings on job sites that have a diverse audience. And here are just a few examples. There are many, many more. And so with respect to recruitment marketing campaigns, those campaigns that are directed at diverse talent can yield excellent results. Recruitment marketing consists of organizations sending out a series of email or social or even text campaigns with engaging content to attract or drive diverse talent to a landing page where they can find even more information about the organization's culture, the job itself, and other relevant information. With recruitment marketing, the idea is to continuously keep your talent pipelines filled by nurturing the talent with personalized, relevant information. This approach results in a greater applicant to conversion rate. So now let's talk about technology. Okay, so technology can really help with diversity. For instance, video screening can be more inclusive in terms of who gets screened. So by that I mean, if you're using video screening, most likely you're able to screen more candidates than you would if you have to personally phone call each candidate. I know of one large financial services company who used to only hire from Ivy League schools. And because of video screening, they were able to expand the number of schools they recruit from. That's being more inclusive. Using technology to provide for anonymization of names is a good way to reduce bias. Another technology approach is to use predictive analytics to determine who is most qualified and would likely receive an offer from your organization. And usually that's based on concrete metrics like previous employers or schools, experience level, etc. Machines really don't discriminate. People do. And then we don't want to forget about great metrics and dashboards because they play a critical role in your diversity hiring success. It's important to keep track of the percentage of diverse candidates in your talent pool, the percentage of diverse hires that are made, And of course, which sources are most effective at generating diverse hires, really important. And one practice that's often not implemented, but is important to do is to actually get feedback from candidates on the recruitment, interviewing, and hiring process to see if it's fair, if it's perceived as fair. So let's look at metrics in terms because I just mentioned metrics, but I want to give you more of a in-depth perspective. Here we see about half of the organizations are using metrics such as time to fill, voluntary turnover, and quality of hire. However, where are the metrics for diversity? So if you look at the bottom of the list, and by the way, this answer list is a heck of a lot longer in my survey, but those two metrics went towards the bottom. And as you can see, only a small percentage of organizations indicate that they use diversity metrics such as percentage of diverse hires and percentage of diverse candidates. Organizations may be tracking those metrics, but they're not using them on a regular basis to measure the effectiveness of their hiring practices. Until we consider diversity metrics as critical measures of success and track and use them on a regular basis, organizations are not going to be able to achieve a truly diverse and inclusive workforce. So let's see what's the impact of diversity and inclusion programs. So effective diversity and inclusion programs like an employee resource group or affinity group, and there's countless other different types of programs, not only impact quality of hire, but they also impact key performance indicators like productivity, revenue, innovation, and retention. One item that's not on this list is employer brand, which can be positively impacted by your diversity and inclusion programs. My thought here is that an effective diversity and inclusion program enhances your organization's employer brand, enhances your organization's culture, and by promoting that brand, that culture, internally and externally, you're going to be better able to attract a quality, diverse workforce. So what are some barriers to a successful diversity and inclusion program? And so, as you can see, the top two barriers are being culturally resistant, or the culture being resistant, and a lack of funding and budget. So to me, this reminds me of the original poll question I asked at the beginning of the survey, and it just seems to be aligned. The poll question was, do you think your company culture promotes diversity and inclusion? And what we saw was that more than half are not doing as much as they could to promote diversity and inclusion. There seems to be a lot that's limiting the success of diversity and inclusion programs. And now let's look at engagement. How can organizations engage diverse populations from a cultural perspective and a hiring perspective? So Brandon Hall has conducted several surveys about how organizations view and practice employee engagement. And we've analyzed the employee engagement data by key employee segments. We asked organizations whether most of their employees from each of these segments participate in engagement efforts and promote the organization internally and externally. What we found was that only in the area of executive leadership are organizations seeing high levels of engagement. 62% of organizations indicate that most of their executive leaders are involved in engagement initiatives and promote the organization. The percentages for the rest of the key segments are pretty low. Look at diverse new hires. Only 19% of organizations feel that segment is highly engaged. Employee brand ambassadors help your organization attract new talent through advocacy and referrals for employment. And you're hurting your diverse recruiting efforts by not engaging with diverse engagements through the hiring and onboarding process. Engagement begins during recruitment. So we're going to look at two case studies really quickly. The first one is Accenture. Accenture is a global management consulting firm with a huge number of employees, and they received a gold award from a Brandon Hall group for their diversity and inclusion program. So Accenture recognizes that a sound diversity strategy is a business imperative, and that by 2020 they want to be a magnet for the best people regardless of gender, ethnicity, religion, culture, sexual orientation, or physical ability. The diversity strategy recognized first that diversity is increasingly important to all of their clients, which are in 120 countries. So, you know, that is one of your constituent populations, and that diversity drives shareholder value. So Diversity Inc.'s index shows that top 50 diverse companies outperform the Dow Jones Industrial Average and the S&P 500 on a 3- and 5-year basis. Both those are two strong reasons to develop a diversity and inclusion program. So without going into too much detail, I like that their program is so comprehensive and uplifting. They address hiring and retaining diverse talent and using metrics to improve their talent pipelines. That's perfect. They amplify diversity programs by publicly announcing them, and they have special programs like maternity leave policy. In addition, they celebrate diversity in their culture. And as I said before, culture plays a critical role in attracting and hiring quality, diverse talent. And just to give you an idea of the level of the detail of the program and how they approach it, every time they develop a new program, Accenture conducts focus group discussions and one-on-one personal interviews to take into account the needs of the diverse employees. So examples of some of their other programs: Returning Mothers Program, People with Disability, and the Accessibility Council. So as you can see, that is why they won the Gold Award. Pretty comprehensive program. Now let's look at Duke Realty. That's another award-winning case study for Duke Realty, which won the Bronze Award from Brandon Hall Group for making diversity a business priority at Duke. And so Duke Realty is a commercial real estate firm, and they have over 700 employees. Duke focuses their diversity and inclusion efforts in 4 major areas: customers, associates, suppliers, and the community. While Duke's approach is very comprehensive, for the purposes of this webinar, I just want to focus on their talent acquisition efforts. First, Duke leverages their involvement with professional organizations and relationships with educational institutions to meet and recruit diverse candidates. That's one of the things we spoke about before. And you know what I really like about their approach is that for each job opening, the recruiter conducts a search strategy with the hiring manager to ensure that there's a focus on developing a diverse candidate pool. And to further this focus, the company sets a goal that at least 75% of the openings have a diverse candidate slate before making a hiring decision. So that's really great. And they're also careful about their recruiting sources. Remember, that's one of the metrics I felt that was important. Their key sources are through networking, referrals, and job boards. The organization has provided training to all associates on networking and emphasizes the importance of expanding your network through exercises such as who sits at your table. So that's pretty interesting. I've just listed some of the sites that they recruit at, so just remember there's lots more, and those are really great sites that are listed there. And so now let's move on to how technology can support your diversity and inclusion efforts. Remember that we spoke about the different elements of diversity and inclusion that are being tracked. Well, it seems that the greater majority of organizations are using manual processes to some degree to track that data. You've got 39% that track it manually and 36% that do a combination of automated and manual processes. If you're using manual processes to track diversity and inclusion, then it's very probable you're going to miss some items. And the results, and that's going to impact the results of your efforts, and it could be very risky in terms of getting more complaints from employees. So, I mean, that might be one of the big reasons why, and this survey was conducted in 2016, that might be one of the bigger reasons why some of the data does not look too good with respect to diversity and inclusion. Next, I want to look at predictive and prescriptive analytics because that can really help with diversity. So we have a survey, by the way, we have a survey in the field now about talent analytics, and we want to get at organizations' perceptions about the use of predictive and prescriptive analytics. I was happy to see that nearly 3/4 of the organizations we surveyed agree that predictive prescriptive analytics can increase diversity within the candidate pool. So that's great. So predictive analytics, and I think I mentioned this before, can help you identify the candidates that are most likely to be qualified for the position based on specific criteria, like schools attended, experience level, organizations worked for, and so forth. Machines don't discriminate or have built-in prejudices. Humans do. And so now I'm very pleased to introduce Jeanette Maister, and who is going to be speaking about some case studies and is also going to introduce Seldric Blocker from NBCUniversal. So I'm thrilled to have both of you to speak.
Great, thank you so much, Daria. Well, just quickly, I thought I would just introduce Seldric and just give some background to everyone about NBC and the work we do with them at WCN. So NBCUniversal come to us at WCN for our event product, which is tailored with both our WCN campus and diversity solutions to fit the very specific needs of NBCUniversal and what they need to do in the recruiting world. And since our partnership with them, they've increased their diversity hires and also created a really strong diversity pipeline. So with that, I'm very pleased to pass it over and introduce our client and friend, Seldric Blocker, who's the Director of Campus Programs at NBCUniversal, who's here to tell you more. So over to you, Seldric.
Thanks, Jeanette. Hi, everyone. Hope everyone is doing well. So wanted to chat and just a little bit more about me and the role that I do at NBCUniversal. So I manage a team of about 14 people within campus recruiting. So we recruit for about 2,100 interns over the course of the year. Our program runs 3 times a year. So there's a summer program, a fall program, and a spring semester, which starts in January, but we call it spring, so a spring program. And then if there's an Olympics year, that's an additional 300 or so. So we recruit for all of the NBC properties, so hopefully things that you are familiar with, like the Today Show, Tonight Show, Saturday Night Live, MSNBC, CNBC. We have our cable properties like Oxygen, Bravo, E, etc. So those of you that may be familiar with the media entertainment industry will get this. I came from an HR background, but in financial services. So some of the phenomenons that were happening in media entertainment were unique for what I had seen, but we were finding ourselves at NBCUniversal in a couple of different areas where we needed to tackle. So we had some challenges, some issues based on just the industry, old Hollywood, New York media entertainment. So what we were finding across the entire organization, but especially within our campus hires and their intern hires, back once upon a time, a long time ago, a lot of the internship programs were unpaid internships, and so in order for you to get access to an internship or a full-time job, you had to know someone, or you had to work for free in places like New York and Los Angeles. But we were finding that we were underrepresented with ethnic diversity across functions, especially with women in technology, that there were some biases from different backgrounds, different cultures. I mentioned that if you knew someone within the industry, then you were highly likely to get in, but if you just weren't from New York or from LA, or if you just didn't have someone who was already in the media entertainment industry, you may just never have known about those types of opportunities. And so we also saw similar, just some things that were causing a barrier to entry. I mentioned if you couldn't afford to live in New York or LA, work for free and pay for school, then you couldn't necessarily survive enough to work and have the opportunity to work or intern with us. So we wanted to do some things that address all of these challenges. So we can go to the next slide. So what we did is came up with a multi-pronged strategy, and there's still tons of work that could be done, should be done, will be done, but we focused in on a couple of key areas, and I'll talk through them. So we established a fellowship program, and so that program, I like to call it our honors program, but we established a partnership with our diversity and inclusion team where we would have as a part of the internship program, we would target diverse candidates or champions of diversity and would accelerate them. So when we would go to campus or throughout the year, meet folks, we wanted to be very competitive and get the top talent, lean in on diverse talent. And so with this fellowship program, we provide housing for the interns when they're with us during the summer. So it makes us more competitive, it gets some really top talent in, and then it reduces that barrier of entry from a housing standpoint. We also provide them with some additional coaching and some exposure that they get over the course of the summer with the goal of ultimately hiring them into a full-time capacity. We also have our school program. So this is our university relations school strategy where we attend about we have 14 campuses that we have established that we're going to really dig deep in and build those relationships, but we are on campus at about 60 to 70 campuses, and we do things like information sessions and classroom presentations, but in some campuses we will, as part of the overall strategy, we'll make sure that we're targeting specific diverse organizations on those campuses. So whether it be fraternities, sororities, whether it be a multicultural affairs office or a club that is representative of diverse populations, diverse students, we'll target those as well. We've also partnered with a number of historically Black colleges and Hispanic service institutions, so the Cal State, Northridge, a couple of the Cal State schools. We also have a deep relationship with Howard University in Washington, D.C., Hampton University, Morehouse College, Spelman College in Atlanta, and Florida A&M University in Tallahassee, Florida. In addition to the schools, what we do on campus, we have a partnership with many diversity partner organizations. So there are organizations such as the Posse Foundation or T. Howard, Emma Bowen, where the organizations themselves start reaching out to students. Posse, for instance, reaches out to students in their senior year of high school, provides them with an academic scholarship, and then we partner with Posse when the students are getting close to their sophomore year, junior year, looking for internships, and we work with Posse to post our jobs on their website and have a great relationship with their career counselors across the country, et cetera. And so many organizations work in this manner, and so we partner with them to feed candidates over to our managers. We attend a variety of different diversity conferences, the National Association of Black Journalism, the Asian American Journalism Conference. I am in Philadelphia today attending the National Black MBA Conference. And we do more than just sit at the booth and have a passive recruitment strategy. We are engaging with posting jobs ahead of time, meeting folks on campus saying, hey, are you going to get National Black in Philadelphia this year? Come by and check us out. Let me get your resume early. Maybe we're going to set some time for a coffee chat or an interview, and then follow up with those candidates after the conference. And then, like Jeanette mentioned, we use WCN technology to help support the recruiting events in our pipeline. So at a conference like this or other events on campus, we have the ability to capture the information from who's attending what event. So if we're at Howard at the School of Communications conference, we will talk to hundreds of students, but we want to capture their information. We want to be able to synthesize that information and be able to get it out quickly and to our recruiters and managers, and make sure that it happens as easily for the candidate as it does for us, and that we are also able to sustain that process event over event, time over time. So moving forward, let's talk about the results. So we definitely have seen an increase in a diverse hires and pipeline into full-time roles, and it's one of those things where if you focus on it, then you can see some traction. It definitely is something to continue to innovate and evolve, but we're really excited about the results that we've seen so far. So I mentioned that we hire upwards of 2,000 interns every year, and if it's an Olympics year, so right now we are finalizing the placement of the 2018 Winter Olympics. With the Olympics specifically, prior to Rio Olympics last summer, my team didn't recruit for the interns that were going to the Olympics. I don't even believe those interns were paid a couple of years ago. So like I mentioned before, it was very much a who do you know in order to get into the Olympic internship program. And if you can imagine, Rio is a very beautiful place, and we take care of housing and we take care of their transportation to the Olympic Games. So there are tons of people that are excited about that opportunity, but if you just have no idea about it, then you don't have a shot. So what we did is we assumed responsibility for the recruiting of the Olympic interns, and we targeted some of our diverse organizations, some of our schools, where we had a very key focus recruiting strategy to make sure that we were being more inclusive of who gets access to even apply. And so we saw a 15% increase in diversity for the Olympics, which was groundbreaking for us. Many of our folks that come into our fellowship program, for instance, we see a 100% accept rate for that. And then we also have increased our diversity hiring in areas that have typically been very highly underrepresented, like NBC Sports or in some of our technology opportunities. And then intern conversion into full-time roles has increased as well. So we're really excited about all those results.
Great. Well, Seldric, thank you so much. That was such a great case study and all the details. And I think all of us would love to apply to be an intern for the Winter Olympics and all Olympics thereafter. So I think this is a great recruiting tool just for that. But seriously, thank you so much. It's incredibly helpful to everyone to hear the journey that NBCUniversal has gone on. What I thought I would do now as the next step is just walk everyone through another case study from one of our other clients, not as sexy as NBCUniversal, but the British Transport Police. And just to give everyone some background on the British Transport Police, they're the national police force for the railways in England, Scotland, and Wales. And they have about 5,000 employees with about 550 openings annually. And when they came to WCN, they were really struggling to attract candidates. And this was primarily due to a lot of career misperceptions that people had about the railway police. And they also knew that their candidate, their recruiting process wasn't candidate friendly. They also had a very strong goal of trying to increase both women and Black minority applicants because they really wanted to represent the local communities across the country, which was similar to Daria's case that she talked about with another police force in the U.S. So what we did together with them was first the police force, they started holding very specific events and diversity-focused workshops to give context and to really clarify misperceptions of the force as a profession. So it was very much an educational type of recruiting event for them. The other thing they did was really streamline their recruiting process. So we worked with them, and when the candidates would register for these workshops, there was a very simple registration form that was candidate friendly. It has some key information that they needed to decide if a candidate could actually attend the workshop. So things like, have you ever been arrested? Because obviously they might not want to hire someone who'd been arrested from the police force. So things like that, and then it was easy for them to decide, yes, this candidate can attend, and they would get that formal invitation. And they had a fantastic process for after the candidates attended the educational workshop, where they would follow up, encouraging those candidates to apply to different roles, sending them further information. And this was a very different type of a process than had been used in the past, not just for the British Transport Police, but also just normal police recruiting. So it was just very candidate friendly and really changing the game. And then the third thing that they did was they created a place where candidates who were interested in joining the British Transport Police could say they were interested. So maybe, they weren't ready to apply, and, a lot of us have done this, but just having a place for people to express their interest allowed the British Transport Police to keep in touch with those candidates, mine it for talent, and then most importantly, send event invitation and workshop invitations to keep them in touch. So when that candidate was ready to apply, they felt like they had a really nice connection and understood what the opportunities were all about. And the results were incredible. I mean, they literally doubled their female and Black minority applicants and hires, which is just, that alone is an incredible result. That was their main goal. They were able to do that. And the other results were they now had a very candidate-friendly process, and I'm sure, as you can imagine, compliance is really important for a police force, and so they were able to really easily pull reports for compliance and have the proof in the pudding and the data to back up what they were doing. So that's the British Transport Police and what they were able to do in their diversity strategy. I thought we would just bring a few more, mini case studies, if you will. We thought it'd be interesting to talk about what happens when clients add predictive analytics to the mix. And so, not surprisingly, predictive analytics, which Daria had talked a bit about before, it really can deliver great and diverse hires. So we have a client, a Fortune 100 client, that was able to really, for them, tackle talent scarcity and hire 50% from new sources and really mine their existing but underutilized talent pool. And by going out to new sources, you're able to get great candidates and diverse candidates that you weren't even looking at before. We also have a Fortune 250 client that were able to increase their diversity hires by 14% when they started using predictive analytics. And then finally, we have a company with 80,000 employees that were able to drive their time to hire down to 3 days. And this is one of my favorite examples, is that within 30 minutes, a candidate starts their application, and the system automatically decides if they should be invited to interview, and through predictive analytics, and then once it does, as part of the application process, the candidates can self-schedule themselves in for an interview. So they're able to move this process really fast. It's really powerful stuff, and that's how you can get to great diverse candidates quickly. So just moving on, to me and for us at WCN, the great thing about predictive analytics is that you don't miss anyone. We have this predictive scoring algorithms, and it allows our clients to zero in on the best candidates. So there's no black hole, there's no one who slips through the cracks, who isn't overlooked, because it looks through and is able to say, hey, this is a great candidate you may have overlooked. There's, here's, they have a high probability of receiving an offer. You really should look at them. again, if you don't have something, you have to go through every single thing, and unfortunately, at times people get overlooked. And I think the other thing, the next point, just on the next slide, is that predictive analytics reduces bias, because it can really tune out any adverse impact of your current selection process. Any, unintended bias, as, Daria said before, machines don't discriminate, people do. And sometimes they do it, they don't mean to, but unfortunately it happens. And I think, what's interesting to us is there's been a lot of attention in recent years about name-blind, anonymous screening, and using that as a method to combat bias in recruitment. And we've actually here at WCN done a lot of research in this area through a lot of what we're doing with predictive analytics and intelligence. And we've partnered with research with professors of data science at different universities. One of the big ones is UCL. And so the research that they've done in partnership with us has actually shown that a candidate's gender can be extremely accurately predicted from name-blind screening. So I'll say that another way. We found through our research that name-blind, anonymous recruitment practices does not recruit bias significantly, which is like fascinating to me when we start to see our research, which, by the way, we'll be publishing shortly, and we can send it out. And because it's the opposite of what we think. You think is if it's anonymous screening, if you don't see someone's names or certain things are taken out of that resume, well, there shouldn't be any bias. But what we found is the way that people, women phrase things on the resume, someone can guess it even though their names have been taken out. And so, for us, so we said we've become very focused on tuning out any adverse impact or unintended bias of our clients' current selection process by using predictive analytics tools, because it pulls out the bias, and therefore it levels the playing field. And exactly, quoting Daria from earlier, and I literally wrote down that quote because I thought this was so perfect to really, end before we go to questions. Is, Daria said, machines don't discriminate, people do. And so if we can, again, level that playing field, pull out any of that unintended bias, so we can really level that playing field. So with that, I thank everyone for attending today's webinar, and we will turn it over to questions. Turn it over to you.
Great, Jeanette, Seldric, Daria. Great approach to diversity hiring. Now, we do have some questions already in the queue, but I'll remind everyone that you can submit your questions in the GoToWebinar platform. We'll be sure to get to them. Any that we can't get to before the top of the hour, we'll make sure we follow up offline. If you want to contact success@brandonhall.com, or you have WCN's information there on the left, you can email info@wcnsolutions.com. So the first one, Seldric, it's actually coming over to you from Jim. How do you select people into the fellowship and honors programs? Who gets to determine that?
That's a great question. So what we do is we have some advertising that we do when we go to campus about the fellowship program that it describes what it is. And we also make sure we communicate to our team when we are out on campus of what we're looking for, the timeline of the fellowship program. And so as we're having conversations with students, whether it be at an information session or at a career fair or via recommendation of someone, if we are impressed in person based on their background, based on their prior work experience, or whatever the reason is, we have two processes. We have a super accelerated process where if it's a candidate where we're like, oh, this is someone that we would absolutely not want to lose to one of our competitors, then they have a conversation with a manager on my team who's the diversity manager for our campus programs, and then I may weigh in as a final decision maker. But we also have a less accelerated process where we receive all of the candidates that have applied or have been recommended for the fellowship program. They go through a video interview. They answer a question around how the fellowship would help them achieve their career goals. And then we have a committee of folks from the campus recruiting team that goes through the applications and selects the candidates based on what they're looking for. If just as an example, we aren't always looking for people who are on-air talent. So, if someone wants to be the next Matt Lauer or someone, then that's probably not someone that we're looking for the fellowship program. But if there's someone that is looking for a broad experience in media and entertainment, maybe just hasn't had the opportunity to do so, but definitely has ambition, drive, motivation, all of those different competencies, then that's someone that we would want to apply and see go through the fellowship program.
Great, thanks for that detail, which certainly shapes that program more. Now, here's a question that all three of you can answer. Shauna asked about tracking diversity when we were talking about the areas of diversity tracking. She asked about what is volunteered. Now, she can only track what her organization's volunteered, but how do you get more of that information out so you can get a better idea of your diversity inside your company as well as your hirings?
So yes, I agree that definitely it has to be, especially when you're in the recruiting process and the applicant is still filling out the application. It's definitely volunteer forms that are completed. You can't force a candidate to fill out that type of information, and I think it's discriminatory if you do, and you're also supposed to disregard it during the actual hiring process. But she's right, yes, it is voluntary information. And so, I don't know that you can force anyone to provide that type of information. Does anyone want to chime in? Jeanette?
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree with you. Completely, it has to be completely voluntary. What a lot of our clients do is they make the questions mandatory, but there's an option to say, I prefer not to specify. Right.
Right.
So that's, but again, it's, and, the key is a lot of times anonymizing it. So, we have a lot of our clients where the recruiters cannot even see what the candidate filled out, so it's just purely used for reporting purposes and whatnot. And but in talking just from that standpoint, one way I've seen organizations handle it is having different newsletters or certain communities they can opt into, and then so it might be like a women's network, and you can get specific content for women. And so obviously men can join that, but that's if you're trying to get some certain content out to them to engage with those candidates, that's certainly a way I've seen organizations to do that around diversity and creating those diversity communities prior to them applying.
Yeah, this is Seldric. The only thing I would add, because we're very similar, but the only thing I add, from a tracking standpoint, we track people of color and we track women. We do, in our work with a lot of the different organizations, diversity organizations, can track how many hires we've had from said organization. So if it's an organization for people with disabilities, then we can figure out that number or that tracking method. There's still a lot of gray area when it comes to tracking diversity outside of race and gender, but what our D&I team reports out on is race and gender, and then our partnerships or our efforts for increasing diversity representation through our work proactively and partnerships.
Great. I'm going to ask one more question, and then I'll send it back to the three of you for final thoughts. So Sarah asked, how do you present the program for diverse students without making them feel as though they're only in this because they're a minority? So it sounds like that's to you, Seldric, but also from a broader scale on all of your diversity and inclusion programs. How do you make them feel like they're chosen for their talents and not for their minority?
Yep, no, that's a great question. So, what I have done, and that question comes up in different forums that I've been a part of. And it's a very valid, very fair question. And I think what we do is we are very transparent, and we say, look, there is underrepresentation, and that's not a secret. I think it's part of the history of many companies, many industries, especially media and entertainment. But we also, and part of the reason why I call it the honors program is because we're hiring folks in that are competitive regardless of what their diversity makeup is. You have to, they have to be able to do the job and have to be able to have demonstrated that they have the capability to do the job well. So when they start with us, we do have the conversation with them about, you are in this program, but you are an intern just like all the other interns. Your responsibilities are, no different. And it can go different ways. I've seen where students have been really excited about being, I am a fellow with NBCUniversal, and I try not to deflate them, but you still got to do your job. So we are very specific where we say, hey, look, you may not want to introduce yourself as a fellow that puts you in this class. However, you're an intern just like everyone else, but you were selected based off of your ability, and we want to be competitive in the diversity recruiting space to make sure that we are representative of everyone. So it sometimes can be a tricky conversation, but we try to be as transparent as possible, but really stick to the skills that they're bringing to the table and the expectations that we have of them as a contributing member of the team.
Great, thank you. Jeanette, Daria, closing thoughts?
Well, thank you, everybody, for attending and being so engaged in this webinar. And if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me, Jeanette, any of us, and we'd be happy to answer your questions. And by the way, if you've asked a question and you haven't received, we weren't able to answer it during this time, we'd be happy to follow up with you.
Absolutely, just echoing everyone's thoughts. Thank you for being with us today. We appreciate it, especially on this, very important topic. And enjoy the rest of your day.